The sermon this morning, I called it Unity and Difference. But I just thought right up front, I would actually give you my three main points. I know Jess is tired, so I'm worried she might fall asleep before the end of it. So I'm going to give you my three main points right up front so that you're welcome to go to sleep after that. The first point I want to make is that we've got to start learning to love each other genuinely. Bless you. We've got to start learning to love each other the way that God wants us to love each other. We need to look past our offenses and our differences. We need to start learning to love each other properly. The other point number two is that we've got to stop being discipled by the digital world, because it's training us to hate our brother or our sister. And my third point is that God's standard for love and unity is much, much deeper than I think we grasp. So I'm going to ask a question. How fiercely do we hold on to community? How fiercely do we hold on to community? Because we say that we love each other. We say that we care for each other, but how far does that love really go? What's the point where we decide that I've had enough, like I'm out of here? And I want to suggest this morning that point, that we separate ourselves from each other, we do it far too quickly, far too easily. And we divide over small things, small frustrations, petty differences, small offenses. So I want to challenge us, me included, because as I've been preparing this, it's challenged me on a couple of things. To get past those differences to a higher standard, to God's standard. I want to challenge us to seek God's standard in this. So let's start with Jesus. In John 13, Jesus is with his disciples for the final hours of his life, and what does he do? What does he say? The interesting thing is he doesn't start with words. It's not. He sits down with them and he washes their feet. He takes the role of a servant. He leads through serving. He shows them what love looks like. He doesn't just speak what love looks like. He says to them, "A new commandment I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." And that word commandment is important, because if you think about it, these are first century Jews. The commandments were really, really important. They knew the 10 Commandments, and this wasn't Jesus kind of adding on an extra commandment onto the 10. This was Jesus summing up the 10 Commandments in one sort of phrase. And notice the standard that he uses. He doesn't say like, love the people who look like you or act like you or talk like you or think like you. The standard that he says is love as I have loved you. And the thing is that at that moment, the disciples didn't actually fully understand the love that Jesus was going to be loving them with. But he was saying, love as I have loved you. They didn't see the cross at this point. They didn't know how far Jesus' love was going to go. But then Jesus says this. He says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples. So the way that people see God in the world, there's all kinds of ways, but the way that people will see God is through us, through the way that we love each other. He says, love one another as I have loved you. And it's incredibly important. But to see how important it is, we need to go back to the beginning. But before we do that, I want to ask the question again. How fiercely do we hold on to community? What's a reasonable reason to separate ourselves from each other? I mean, are our differences enough?
Yeah.
So let's go back to Genesis. So in Genesis 2, God forms the human from the dirt. And he takes this pile of dirt, breathes life into the dirt, and he forms a human. And then he places the human in the garden to do some work, gives him work to do. But then he says, it's not good for the human to be alone. And that's not just like a little throwaway statement. That's actually an incredibly significant statement, because it's saying from the beginning, humans, we are not meant to live in isolation. We're not designed to sort of be these little self-contained islands. I mean, I'm an introvert. We may be introverts, but that doesn't give us an excuse to isolate ourselves. We are meant to live in community. But then God, he makes a helper, and Azer is the Hebrew term. And I think we've kind of got this like bit of a weak picture of what a helper is. It's not this weak word. It's a powerful word. It's actually the same word that is used in the Old Testament for when God rescues Israel from her enemies. That's the word helper. That's what God makes as from the human. And it's not just an interesting old story. It's teaching us something deep about what it means to be human. In that moment, God takes he takes a human and he divides the human up into two, and he makes male and female. But then the next thing he does is he calls husband and wife into unity. So the movement is from unity to division back to unity. And the point is that to be fully human is to be connected to each other.
That's right.
We don't fully reflect God on our own. We don't fully reflect God as individuals. Husband and wife, man and woman reflect God together. They reflect a bigger picture of the fullness of God together. Same with us. It's like a recipe. You don't get a full picture of the tastes and the amazing thing of a recipe through just one ingredient. You need the whole lot for it to really taste good. And I think the problem is that this is difficult for us to grasp, because we live in a world that constantly tells us that we are individuals first, that your freedom is first, that your preferences are first, or your comfort is first. That's the world that we're living in, but the Bible gives a completely different picture. It tells us that from the beginning, we are made for relationship. And if you think about it, the entire universe is made up of relationship. The entire universe is made up of relationship. Think about it. Atoms, gravity, music, color, all of those things are about relationships. I challenge you to try and think of something in the universe that's got nothing to do with relationship. Because from the beginning, we were made for communion. We were made for belonging. And in the ancient world, they understood this idea much, much, much deeper than we actually can grasp. Because they didn't have governments to look after them. They didn't have technology to kind of keep them safer. They had to depend on each other. They depended on their family and on their tribe and on their community around them, and even on the pacts that they might have made with the neighboring tribes or their enemies. They knew how important belonging was. And in Genesis, God is already showing us something important, that to be human is to belong. But even more than that, to fulfill our purpose, we can only do that in community. In Genesis 1:28, after creating man and woman, God tells them to be fruitful, to multiply and rule over the earth. That calling isn't to a lonely individual, it's to people together. So, I mean, you often hear of people who are heading off to the mountains to find themselves and figure out what their purpose is. That's not where you find your purpose. You find your purpose in community with people that you trust, that you can talk things through. That's where you find your purpose. And this pattern runs right through the whole Bible. Male and female are obviously the first sort of great picture of unity and difference, but they're not the last, because again and again, Scripture shows us a God who creates unity and then creates difference and then calls difference into unity. There's families and tribes and peoples and nations. So we're made different, but we're made for unity. There's a unity that's meant to hold us all together, hold our differences together. But an interesting thing is that we're not called to difference for the sake of difference. He's a Canadian icon carver and writer, Jonathan Pageau, and he says that diversity without unity is just decomposition. And that's a strong way of saying that difference without love or without order or without a shared center just eventually falls apart. And if you look around, the world is, listen to the stories, all the movies, the books that you read, it's about the amazing thing of difference. But there's no common bond that holds that difference together. It is becoming a decomposing mess. And the beauty of God's design is not just that we are made different, it's that our differences can belong together. Male and female reflect different facets of God's glory, and human beings each uniquely image God in different ways. From the beginning, God weaves together families and tribes and cultures and nations. And that thread continues all the way through to the end of the Bible with Revelation, where the final picture is every tongue, tribe, and nation gathered around the throne of God. And the key is this, that God is glorified by our diversity when there is unity. From the very beginning, God has been teaching us that we are not made to live as sealed off individuals. And difference is not the enemy. Isolation is the enemy. We become more fully ourselves, not by radical independence, which is what the world is telling us, but by rightly ordered communion. So my question remains, what is a reasonable reason to separate ourselves from each other as Christians? What about conflict or hurt feelings or offense? I think offense is probably one of the biggest reasons for division amongst Christians in the church across the world. I remember a good few decades ago, we had a visiting worship leader, Brian Dawkson, and he came in and we had whatever worship conference or whatever it was, and he said, whenever somebody new joins his worship team, the first thing he does, he sits down with them and he says, it's not if I offend you, it's when I offend you. Yeah. And I think like that stuck with me. That is such good advice to hear. Like, it's not if, it's when. Because the reality is at some point, we're all going to take offense. We're all going to be offended, but we're all going to offend somebody at some point. We're all going to misunderstand or be misunderstood. We're all going to be disappointed in somebody, or we will be a disappointment to somebody. And the thing is, even people outside the church have noticed how dangerous offense can be. There's this first century Stoic philosopher, Epictetus, he said, whenever, and this is a good one, whenever you are offended, understand that you are complicit in the offense. We would be much more careful about taking offense if we understood that we are complicit in the offense. And then there's this other great philosopher, Ricky Gervais, and he said, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. And there's this quote that always makes me smile. It says, "He who takes offense when offense was not intended is a fool. Yet he who takes offense when offense is intended is an even greater fool." Like, there's no space for offense. And it's a tough lesson to learn, but it's the same thing that Solomon said in Proverbs, where he said that he said, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is to his glory to overlook an offense. But the thing is, I think many of us have this weak understanding of what unity is. We think unity means no disagreements, that we just live in this like perfect space of happiness, and there's no tension or conflict, no difficult conversations. But that's not real unity. Real unity is not tested when everyone agrees. Real unity is tested when it costs us to hold it together. That's real unity. It's not proven how warmly we gather on a Sunday. It's proven by whether our love survives the strain of difference and misunderstanding and irritation and offense. It's loving one another through those disagreements. And I'm saying this because it's going to happen. We are going to be offended. I am going to offend you at some point, I'm sure. Brett's going to offend you. Definitely. Matt's always offending. I'm joking. And the thing is, as South Africans, maybe we understand this better than most because we know the long-term damage that division can do. And we know that unity doesn't just appear by magic. It's not this easy thing. It takes work. It takes sacrifice, and it takes patience. And we are a country of deep diversity, which is amazing. But as I've pointed out, diversity on its own can't hold us together. We need something deeper. We need a bigger story. We need a common love. And I think as Christians, we uniquely have that. And over the years, Brett and I have had our fair share of disagreements and pretty uncomfortable conversations. But I think the basic assumption from both our sides is that we love each other and we're not walking away. I mean, Michelle and I have had our fair share of feisty conversations, and things are not thrown at each other very often. And Emily and Kate, when we're having a disagreement, and I say disagreement sounds much better than it actually is. When we're having a disagreement, Emily and Kate, they obviously don't like it. You can see they're uncomfortable, and sometimes we'll stop the disagreement in the middle of it, and we'll kind of coach them and say the thing is, we're not raising our voices because we don't love each other. We love each other enough to fight for our marriage. And I want them to grow up knowing that that's what real community is. I don't want them to think that going into a marriage or going into community is this easy thing that doesn't take hard work, and that the first sign of conflict, they run away. They need to know what real community is. And in Proverbs 27:17 it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That's what we are as the people of God. Friction is good. Friction is good. And the Bible keeps calling us to this. In Ephesians 4 it says, walk in a manner worthy of the calling you have received, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. That's hard. Colossians 3, it says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. How can we ask for forgiveness, but we hold back forgiveness? Yeah. And those two forgivenesses, whatever that word is, don't even compare. It means that friction is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes friction is a part of how God shapes us. And that's not easy. Unity is costly. It's painful. It asks something of us. That's right. There's always the temptation to stop listening, to become defensive and to protect ourselves and to reject others before they reject us. That's the sort of natural sort of pathway that we usually take. It's much easier to pull away, much easier to harden ourselves, not to have those difficult conversations. But Christian community calls us to something much deeper, but much better. It calls us to stay, to listen, to forgive, to bear with one another's burdens, to keep loving when it costs us. Because that's exactly what it cost Jesus. So how do you know what's worth holding the line on and what we should let go of? Brett used to teach a while ago, and every now and then he does still speak about it, but bounded and centered sets. And it sounds a little bit technical, but the difference between a bounded set and a centered set, a bounded set is a group of people that are defined mainly by their edges, by asking the question, who is in and who is out? That's a bounded set. A centered set is defined by its center. And for Christians, obviously the center is Jesus. And so the question isn't, do you look exactly like me or talk exactly like me or have the same beliefs as me? It's, are we moving to the center? Are we moving towards Jesus together? And obviously it doesn't mean that boundaries don't matter, because obviously they do. It just means that the center matters most. Something very interesting about Christianity, uniquely amongst all the world religions, is that it's always been able to move into a new kind of culture without losing its center. It can adapt in language and style and music and expression without changing the core of what it's about. There's a missionary, Hudson Taylor, who went into China in sort of the 1800s. And at first he went in there and he didn't really win anybody over to Jesus. And then at some point he had this epiphany where he changed from his English clothes into these like robes. He shaved his head, wore like a ponytail, and he came under huge flack from the Christians around him and Christians back in England. They were basically saying he's no longer really a Christian because he doesn't look like an Englishman, which, I mean, how they got there. Look that out. But once he did that, suddenly people started paying attention. That is the beauty of the gospel, is that we can be different. Our differences are not the thing that separate us. And in a way, he was basically just following Paul in 1 Corinthians 9:22, where he said, I've become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some.
Yeah.
And that's centered set thinking. The center stays firm, but not everything on the outside looks exactly the same. So what else gives us a good enough reason to walk away from each other? What about differences in belief? I think this is kind of where it's starting to get tricky. But again, the modern world kind of works against us here because it says little by little, like it trains us to think of the I before the we. So it's about my feelings or my view or my truth or my rights or my comfort. It teaches us to put the self at the center. And the thing is, because it happens so slowly, we don't even really notice it. It's kind of like that the frog in the warm water analogy. The danger isn't even noticed until it's too late. And the problem is, and I can't resist going here, but the problem is technology makes this problem worse. Because the more we live through screens, the more easily somebody else just becomes an idea to us rather than a person. It becomes easier to judge them or label them or dismiss them or cut them off. When we speak face to face, we hear tone, we see expression, we notice somebody's pain, we see the weight of the other person sitting across the table from us. But when we speak through text messages or social media or emails, pretty much all of that just disappears. And with it, our empathy, our ability to relate to people disappears at the same time. There's a clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard, Dr. Helen Reese, and she puts it like this. She says, little by little, this sort of shallow interaction chips away at our ability to feel for others. And you can see that. People look around. I mean, forget about online, but people are so much less patient, less kind, less able to see things from another person's point of view, less able to disagree without resorting to anger. And then profit gets added into the mix because these technology companies, they don't just want our attention, they need our attention. That's how they make their money. So how do they make their money? They keep us clicking and scrolling through cultivating outrage and anger and division. And I'm going to say a few words that might just be triggering to a few people. But notice what happens inside you when I say these words. Just pay attention to what's happening inside. Donald Trump, climate change, Muslims, Julius Malema, abortion, homosexuality, Helen Ziller, prosperity gospel, gender identity, Jacob Zuma, pro-life, pro-choice, woke, patriarchy, corruption, colonialism, immigration, euthanasia, vaccines, creationism, same-sex marriage, evolution, refugees. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. But if you pay attention to what those little things, they stir us up, they feed our strongest reactions. And they use our differences to keep us hooked. They train us, this is the problem, is that they train us to see our brother as our enemy.
That's right.
And this attention economy just divides us. It trains us to divide. There's a French philosopher, Simone Weil, who once said that attention is a form of worship. And then there's this woman, Vanessa Zoltan, who describes herself as an atheist chaplain. I don't know how that works, but she said, we make things sacred by the kind of attention that we pay to them.
Yeah.
And if that's true, and I think it is, that's a sobering thought. Because the things that we pay attention to, we are making those things holy and sacred. Those things are becoming idols to us. Because if something can stir our emotions and capture our hearts, it's beginning to function like an idol. So think for a moment about the things that stir you up online. What pulls you in? What makes you angry? What keeps you coming back? What makes you feel righteous? Because often that's actually at the core of it. We have to be very careful, because sometimes we think we're standing for truth when we're just being discipled by our outrage. And I think this is especially dangerous when it comes to belief. Because far too often, when it comes to belief, we're not looking for restoration. We're not looking to include somebody or help them to understand, or for us to understand another person's point of view. We're looking for separation. We're looking for a way to create distance. We're looking for a reason to cut someone off and to not have to do the hard work of loving that person. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to turn Christianity into a list of rules that we have to follow. They have to be followed exactly as I see them. And if you don't conform, then you're out. Or at least we can't really be friends. But the church has always known that that not every issue carries the same weight. There's an old saying linked to this old monk with a very monkish name. His name was Rupertus Maldinius. It sounds like something out of Monty Python or something, but he said, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, freedom. But in all things, love. That's how we should be living our lives. Because some things are essential and central, and they must be held firmly. There are those things. Because if you have no boundaries at all, then nothing means anything, and it all just ends up in chaos, in that decomposing mess. But not everything is central in the same way. Now, this is a really important thing to grasp. The Nicene Creed, which was like the statement of faith that the early church put together in the early 300s, and to help the church kind of have a core of truths of the Christian faith that everybody could understand. And these truths have endured through this core sort of statement of faith has endured throughout the centuries across all traditions in Christianity. And those are the truths that are the things that are central. But then there are other issues, still important, but not actually carrying the same weight. And that's, I think, where we often get stuck. Because what seems very important to me may not seem equally important to you. So is that a reason for us to divide? So yes, doctrine matters. Truth matters, but not all doctrine has equal weight. And where the issue is not central, then we should be much, much slower to divide. That's why that old saying, it ends in all things love. That we can't escape that. That's not, aside from everything else, we are called to love each other. Even when we disagree, we still have to love each other. We still need to speak with grace. We still need to listen. We still need to be patient and to seek grace and peace where we can. And I think this brings us to one of the deepest problems in the church, and that's that sometimes what looks like principle is actually pride. Sometimes what we call conviction is actually just self-protection. Sometimes we say, I'm standing for truth, but underneath it, what we really mean is that we don't want the discomfort of staying. We don't want to be challenged or to listen anymore. We don't want to do the hard work that love calls us to. Pride can dress itself up as principle. And it sounds spiritual, it sounds serious, it sounds bold. But really it's just a self trying to protect itself. Because pride says, I would rather be right than reconciled. Pride says, I would rather win than love. I would rather withdraw than suffer. But the way of Jesus is different. Because Jesus doesn't call us to an easy love. He calls us to a costly love. Because at the end of the day, our unity should cost us. And too often it doesn't. And I think too often we'd rather walk away than face the pain, the conflict, and the hard work of loving each other. But Jesus gave us a vision for how the world would be able to see God through his people. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's not a shallow love. It's not an easy love. It's not a selective love. That's a love that stays. It's a love that forgives. It bears with one another. That keeps the door open. That doesn't give up too quickly. But as always, Jesus' words go even deeper than that, because I think he seems to love giving us these like seemingly impossible tasks to do. Love one another as I love you. How is that even possible? And yes, he was speaking directly to his disciples, and he was speaking of love within the family of God, but the whole story of Scripture isn't just for this little holy huddle of believers. The whole story of Scripture shows a God whose heart is always moving outwards. For God so loved the world. Human beings, in all our differences, all our pain, all our confusion, all our sin, are still image bearers. We are all, regardless of our beliefs, sons and daughters of God. And so that call of Jesus stretches beyond loving only the people who look like us and are easy to love. He calls us to love our neighbor. I mean, I've got some neighbors that are hard to love. But he even calls us to love our enemy. That's the kind of love that we're called to. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, it seems impossible without God's help. But it's the only kind of love that's ever changed the world. The kind that shows something true about God. The kind that costs us something. And if our love isn't hard or isn't painful or is never costly, then it's probably not enough. We're not loving enough. So let me ask the question one last time. How fiercely do we hold on to community? What should really give us a reason to separate ourselves from each other? Let's follow the example of Jesus, because he so loved the world. That's the love. Let's not be known for what we hate, or God forbid, who we hate. Let's not get on our self-righteous high horses and make our testimony about why we reject those with different beliefs. There's lots of Christians talking about all these things and separating themselves for those reasons. Let's not fool ourselves with our pride that masquerades as principle and condemn the sinners around us. That's happening all over us. Let's step away from that. Let's swallow our pride, our offense, our need to be right. Let's forgive as we've been forgiven. Let's fight for community, fight for one another, fight to love each other the way that Jesus loved us.